So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft really quick, specifically their turnaround, it seems, to start this generation. Now, when the Xbox first came out, the Series X and the Series S wasn't the strongest launch for Microsoft. In fact, they didn't have any games. Like Halo Infinite was on the back of the Xbox Series X with Master Chief right there, but they had to delay Halo Infinite out. It wasn't a great showing that summer. And it led to them saying, you know what, we need more time for this game to come out correctly. And at least we're now working up to it where we're about a month away from it releasing. But since then, we've gone through a pretty rough period for Microsoft with basically no releases. But now that we're in the second half of this year, things seem to have turned around for Microsoft, and it does make me look at this generation as potentially being much more competitive than last. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the SpawnWave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So, first of all, from August until December, Microsoft is going to have a pretty good run of several game releases packed in there. They just had Forza Horizon 5 come out, and it came out pretty well, as we would expect. The Forza Horizon games tend to review well because Playground's got that whole thing figured out. The open world, kind of arcadey style racing games, and they're just a blast to play. Even if you're not into racing games, I completely recommend it. Let's actually go over here to Metacritic, because I started to notice something here. A lot of the games we're going to be talking about towards the end of this year, right, for the Game Awards stuff, Microsoft will be coming up because games are coming from them that will end up most likely in the Game of the Year category. Now, if we look here, these are all the games that were released this year and have high scores, right? Starting at the top, Disco Elysium, The Final Cut. That's not a new game technically, right? It's an older game that they have like the Final Cut for that they've brought up here, so that won't be there. I don't know what this is, this Morgana game. Someone will have to let me know. It doesn't have a lot of reviews, but it's up here with a 97. Tetris Effect Connected, that isn't going to be in there because, again, it's a game that we've had released before, re-released here on the Switch. Hades, same deal there. And then we get to the highest rated new game of the year, and that's between Forza Horizon 5 and Psychonauts 2. Now, this is Psychonauts 2 reviewed on the Xbox One. Forza Horizon 5 reviewed pretty much the same across the board. It didn't even have any negative or mixed reviews from what I saw at the time of this recording. It was just all positive. Like, that was it. So, Forza Horizon 5, the only thing it runs into that seems to disqualify it from Game of the Year conversation is that it's a racing game, and typically those have its own category, no matter how high quality it might be. A Gran Turismo or a Forza don't typically end up in the Game of the Year discussion, which is unfortunate because it does look like Forza Horizon 5 is like that next level racing game from what they've been showing and what people have said. I'll be checking it out next week when it releases into Game Pass. It releases normally. They have like early access. You can buy like the more expensive version, but I'll hang out and wait for it to release there. And then we have Psychonauts 2. This one's an interesting one because technically Microsoft wasn't there when development started for Psychonauts 2, but because of Microsoft being able to fund and allow them to delay the game, it turned out better because of it. This has been mentioned several times by people at Double Fine that if Microsoft hadn't provided the backing in order to do so, it probably would have released earlier and in, I mean, let's face it, not as good of a state as it's in now. We see what happens when games kind of have to get pushed out the door. I'm not saying it would have been Cyberpunk bad, but it probably would not have been up to the quality that they were able to do here, considering they were able to leave it in the oven for a few more months and get everything polished. But Psychonauts 2, another game from a studio that Microsoft has acquired, because remember, that's been Microsoft's strategy now is, look, it takes a while to build these studios up. The initiative is getting help from Crystal Dynamics because it takes a while to build up the culture at the studio, have everyone working together well, and just hire people. Whereas Crystal Dynamics already had a whole fleet of developers ready to go, so they just brought them in for that. So Microsoft said, you know what, it'll take too long to do that. Let's just go out and start acquiring studios that we think would be a good fit for us. And Double Fine. It's one to watch, obviously, with how Psychonauts 2 came out. I think Psychonauts 2 is going to be in the Game of the Year conversation. I believe with the Game Awards, there's 6 slots, and it's starting to get pretty crowded here now at the end as some games are coming out and maybe reviewing higher than people are anticipating. But Forza Horizon 5, Psychonauts 2. So the two best new games this year with a certain amount of reviews. We'll say like 15 or something, right? That, I mean, should be there, you would think. But again, Forza Horizon 5 probably win racing and sports game category. Psychonauts 2, though, keep an eye on that one. Microsoft Flight Simulator, great game, like I said. People seem to really like it who enjoy the simulator games, but it's not a new game. It was just ported over to the Series X, same with Pro Skater 1 and 2. This is an interesting one here, too. Chicory, A Colorful Tale. I have not played this game. Let me know if you have, because it's up there with a 90 right now. Mass Effect Legendary Edition. You know what? I think what they need to do is just have a remaster and remake category at this time, right? I feel like we get so many of them each year, or these extra editions that come out. They might as well just make a whole category for it, because Mass Effect Legendary Edition is very good, but it's not going to be on any of these lists because it's not a new game. It's a compilation that they spent time on basically developing further and releasing. So that'll probably get kind of left by the wayside. So Jeff, if you're watching this, the one thing I would definitely add some sort of category for remasters, re-releases, whatever there. We have Dusk, that was released on the Switch there at 89. It Takes Two. This is one that could find its way in. Otherwise, it may be like a family game or a multiplayer game. I know they have a category there, but that would be kind of an interesting one to throw in there, just because it's so different from everything around it. Scrolling down a bit further, again, Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Good opportunity to have that remasters, remake, whatever category for the Game Awards. Final Fantasy 7 Intergrade, Towns Pro Skater 1 and 2. Synth Riders, Disco Elysium again. There's Psychonauts 2. That one on PC. Fez, It Takes Two, Streets of Rage. And then we get down to one that I wanted to point out, because I wanted to see what people think about this. Deathloop, once again, is under Microsoft now, but it has not been under Microsoft basically for 95% of its development. However, it was delayed under Microsoft, so maybe Microsoft would have at least given the green light for that. But yes, on a technicality, that was released from Microsoft. I don't know if I'm willing to just give it to them completely, but still, they acquired talent that was able to produce something like Deathloop, coming in at an 88. I enjoyed Deathloop. I didn't like the way it ended, but for the most part, the experience was unique enough on the roguelike genre, and I thought it was pretty good. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart will be up there, Game of the Year conversation. Obviously, that was another great game. So we're starting to see some of these games from Microsoft stack up next to some of these games from Sony, like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Now, we do also have Metroid Dread. I expect that to be in the Game of the Year conversation. And there's Monster Hunter Rise, also at an 88. You can kind of see how this is starting to get very crowded at the top here for the Game of the Year nominations, because I also like Death's Door. I know a lot of people like Hitman 3. And I would like to see Tales of Arise get in there, only because we just don't see JRPGs typically find their way into the Game of the Year conversation. We had like Persona 5, which was cool, but like a Tales game being nominated, like when was the last time we ever saw that? But essentially, I was going through this list and I started to realize, wow, I'm looking at a lot of games that either have come from Microsoft with Forza or come from studios that they now own and have acquired over the last year or so, which tells me that as we are heading into this generation currently that we just started up a year ago, it looks like Microsoft is going to have the studios to compete alongside of Sony and Nintendo. I mean, we know Starfield's coming up next year. There's going to be Redfall over the summer, and it seems like they're starting to get things spun up to where maybe they don't need to go out and get so many third-party offerings for Game Pass day one, because they're just able to produce them at, might even say, an alarming rate. We could get to a point where Microsoft is releasing mid to large games from their first-party studios every 2 to 3 months, and that's something they need to do with Game Pass in mind. Do that, like I said, like 4 times a year, have some mid to large game come out, and then kind of fill in the gaps with some very good looking and promising indie titles that you sign on to Xbox Game Pass. That way, hey, they get money. Of course, the smaller indie developers, so they go on to make more and more interesting and unique things. But that way, they continue to have releases, and yeah, they'll probably be pumping out games like a Deathloop that maybe surprise some people with their review scores, or a Psychonauts 2. So I think this is going to be an interesting generation, a competitive generation, which is what I really want from these companies. I want good games, and Microsoft seems like they're poised to at least compete against Sony and Nintendo, something we haven't had in a while. But let me know what you guys think about this whole thing down below. Do you feel like Microsoft is turning things around, especially as we head into the end of 2021 to start up 2022? We have Halo Infinite coming up, and you know what? If 343 can pull off that release and it actually comes out as a good game, I'm going to say mid to high 80s minimum. I mean, Microsoft probably would have one of their best holidays that I can remember. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.